You talked about this driverless car thing is, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. As someone said to me, remarked the other day, I met them, they're from Australia, they had just come to Silicon Valley for the first time. And they were saying, man, only in San Francisco are there cable cars, a decades, hundreds year old technology right next to driverless cars. And that's the advantage of living in San Francisco is that the future is here today, right? And driverless cars are here today. There are countless people getting into and out of driverless cars every single day. So if you are in Brisbane, Australia, my hometown, if you are in the Philippines, if you are in Europe, and you are not seeing that lived experience, it's easy to think of these as distant future possibilities. I'm fond of telling my wife, when I lived in San Francisco, I would get a Spoon Rocket and I would get Postmates and I would get, I think maybe DoorDash came out somewhere in there. I'd get Uber Eats. I'd be taking Uber Black cars. Before that, I was taking Sidecars. Shout out to Jahan. Before that, there was Taxi Magic, right? These things were ordinary in San Francisco 10 years, 12 years before anywhere else. And we were experiencing, Emil, the portal-like, the teleporter-like experience of press a button, get a ride every single day. And I went home years into this and said to my friends, I'm going to go work at Uber. And they're like, what do you mean? Are you going to be a taxi driver? Because they didn't know what Uber was. They never experienced it, right? They didn't understand the technology behind it. And so this is a long way of saying to people who are listening to this show that are not in San Francisco, the Bay Area, not in one of these tier one markets. Some of these things appear like weird techno bros or nerds or billionaires on the All In podcast waxing lyrical about some possible future. But if you're in the right market, paying the right kind of attention, you'll realize these futures are here already, and you may just not be paying attention enough and maybe just being a little bit too cynical or skeptical.
Yeah, I mean, despite San Francisco and California's attempt to destroy innovation in that state, like done everything possible to make it inhospitable to businesses and entrepreneurs, it remains an incredible place to see the future. It just does. And I do think there's some tragedy in that too, in that when you're in London or Paris and you don't have that same view, and then the politicians pre-regulate, they don't get to see the future in those cities. So it becomes scary. And when it becomes scary,
they don't get to participate.
Yeah.
They don't get to participate. It becomes scary. So then the citizens aren't allocating capital, even in the public markets, to those things. They're not noticing the problems that those new technologies create. So it's like, okay, well, now I see Uber on the street and I live Uber. Well, now there's an opportunity to do in-car advertising. There's an opportunity to do in-car merchandise. There's an opportunity to rent cars to Uber drivers. There's an opportunity. You are seeing the new problems created by the new set of technologies just through your lived experience of living in the future, right?
Yeah. And then you realize, well, it's not so scary. There are problems we have to solve, but it's not so scary. And people always ask me, like, why did you guys not ask for permission? You asked for forgiveness at Uber. It's like, it's because of this phenomenon. It's like, if you show people what it could be, then they'll go like, okay, I get it. Let's like deal with the downstream impacts of that. But if they never get to see it, it's going to cause fear and stagnation. And you saw this letter from the European, I think, former President Draghi today about what's the problem in the European economies. And it's like this notion of stagnation, this fear of the future, the set of laws and regulations that keep entrepreneurs and innovation back. So they don't see any of that. And then look what's happening in their economies on a relative basis.
It's funny you mentioned that idea of people can't see it, they don't see it. I literally stopped the work I was doing with my advisory to record this episode, of course. And what I was working on there was a vision document for 2035 for this company that I'm the fractional chief product officer for. And my argument and my reasoning for doing this is I was saying to the CEO, this conservative board we have, this conservative investor base we have, how can they invest in the future unless we paint that future in vivid, compelling, clear narrative? Let's describe for them what this company looks like in 2035. Let's paint that in stark relief and in compelling narrative and make it seem like the most exciting and most inevitable thing they've ever heard. So the reason, again, I'm telling this story is because if you don't live in a San Francisco, you need to start paying attention to those markets to understand the future. But if you're in a company surrounded by conservative people or a conservative board or conservative investors, consider painting your vision in stark relief in vivid detail. Now, there's a balancing act here, right? You don't want to feel like you're untethered from reality and you just have no means from getting from here to there and it's all science fiction nonsense. But if you have a very pragmatic present and you've got a demonstrated ability and capacity to execute, and you can create a very pragmatic roadmap from here to some imagined future, that at least loosens people's grip on their skepticism, even just a little bit. It just moves the ball forward, right?
Remember, London was a center of financial innovation for a long time, right? It allowed the free markets and like there was a lot of innovation there. Paris for art or Florence for art, like, a lot of great cities in the world had their moments where they're pushing the envelope on some new thing for humanity. And now in some ways, like the Asian markets have more optimism on this stuff. A little less China now than 5 years ago, but like Indonesia and Singapore and some of these, like where they're pulling in entrepreneurs in, they're pulling ideas in. Even Saudi is trying to change sort of the nature of the fear-based nature of this. And so it is something I worry about in our country too, never getting too comfortable with status quo.
To bring this all the way back around to the origin of the subject, I do think, we're not financial advisors. We're not giving you financial advice. No one can predict where the bottom is for this correction, this real adjustment. But I for my money, I'm talking about on my own personal decision making. It sounds like, Emil, you're roughly on the same page. I'm just buying the dip and holding onto my ass. Like I have a 10 or 20 year time horizon, right? And so to me, I just accumulate this stuff as fast as I can and as meaningfully as I can. And, someone asked me once about diversification, and I was musing to my wife the other day. She's, that you can be told how the best people work, but it's often people don't change their behavior anyway. Like, so Warren Buffett will talk about this idea of hedging is just another way of saying you don't know how to do your job if you're a capital allocator. Right? He's like, this diversification and hedging thing, he's like, I don't understand it. He's like, develop a strong intuition or opinion about how a business works and invest in your top 2 or 3 ideas, period. Like, what are you diversifying into? You're just admitting that you're throwing shit at the wall. And so for me, again, I'm not giving financial advice. I'm just explaining my own philosophy. I do believe that these companies are going to be running the world. They're running an intelligence layer and a labor layer that I don't know what the hell else everyone else is going to be doing. And so I'm pretty concentrated.
Yeah.
I'm pretty concentrated in my portfolio.
Look, and I think different people are different circumstances, right?
Of course.
You and I bet our time, not just our money, on concentrated bets, right? That's what the tech industry sort of innovated, frankly. It's like, so you get startup stock.
Yes.
And therefore, like, you're way long in that company.
That's
or,
right.
Relative to being an employee at AT&T or something. So, but I've heard the same thing from 2 people outside of Buffett. It was like John Doerr, who was one of the famous venture capitalists at Kleiner Perkins, who invested in Amazon, Google, and he said F diversification. He's like held every share, through 20 years. Steve Ballmer is now richer than Bill Gates because he held on to everyone or, most of his Microsoft shares. So you see that playing out. Like, yeah, and then the Peloton guy blew it all, right? So there are counterexamples, but
well, I'll tell you what, when I was first getting into investing, I was early on just a startup entrepreneur, founder, grinder. I just grind, head down, bum up. The only equity I owned was the companies I founded or that I joined. When I started thinking about capital markets, public markets and property and whatever, I was racking my brain. I'm like, wait, first let me understand, what is the universe of possible investment vehicles and what are the trade-offs and what's the ups and downs and how do I know where to put money in the stock market? And what I came to realize was, hang on a second, I have a massive unfair advantage. I've lived in the future in San Francisco. I use these tools every day. And 99% of people seem to have no effing clue because they don't engage or pay attention. And so all I have to do is buy the companies I believe in and use and know. And it doesn't come it's not any fancier than that. And I realized, if you're listening to this show or watching this show, or you watch a few of these kind of tech shows, you're paying attention to Silicon Valley, you are probably already ahead of the game. And you can listen to all the FUD and all the cycles and all of the whatever. You already know more than most. And it's surprising how much you know compared to most. You will be surprised.